This is the 5:30 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Russ Riesinger.
And I'm Janelle Slade. Gruesome details emerged surrounding the death of a Billings woman on New Year's Day.
Court documents now show a Billings man assaulted his wife with a hammer before he crashed his vehicle with her inside in an attempt to cover up the crime.
All that before the suspect took his own life 3 days later in jail.
Q2's Zoe Zandor has followed this case from day one and joins us now in the newsroom. Zoe?
Russ and Jeanelle, this story grows more twisted by the day. The latest court documents say 7-year-old Daniel Shine admitted to striking 72-year-old Celia Shine multiple times with a hammer at their home on New Year's Eve, trying to kill her. Shine told police he placed her in the vehicle and drove around for more than an hour, then crashed into a power pole on Molt Road to try and cover up the murder. Detectives believe Celia Shine was still alive when she was placed in the vehicle, but died before the crash. Daniel Shine was arrested the following day and committed suicide in the Yellowstone County Jail 2 days later before his first court appearance. Now, Lieutenant Brandon Woolley tells me the investigation is still underway as detectives wait on lab results and other evidence. Russ and Janelle.
All right, thanks so much, Zoe.
Search also continues for a Hardin girl who's been missing since New Year's Day.
Local and federal law enforcement now asking for the public's help in finding 16-year-old Selena Not Afraid. Q2's David J. joins us now with those details and the very latest. David.
Jeanelle and Russ, the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office and the FBI want to hear from anyone who was in the area where Selena Not Afraid reportedly went missing. Witnesses say she walked toward a field at the rest area on Interstate 90 at mile marker 476. The search now includes several other agencies along with Crow and Northern Cheyenne search and rescue crews. Not Afraid rode in a van with other people in it, 5 others, when it stalled. The Sheriff's Office says that it stalled 2 other times. Investigators are looking for clues from anyone who was on Interstate 90 from the rest area to Fly Creek Road on January 1st between 1:30 p.m. and 4 p.m. And if you were in the area, the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office tip line is at 665-9800. Russ, Janelle?
Much, David. Now turning to Chief Forecaster Bob McGuire. Bob, the early morning greeted us with nothing but cold. The afternoon, a little sun. But our evening could bring a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, we started at 1 degree this morning. That's how cold it was. And since then, we warmed up to about 19 to 20 degrees. And now look what's going to happen overnight. 19 at 6:30. By maybe 10:30, it's going to be 23. By 3:30 in the morning, 28 degrees. Same thing at 8:30, possibly all the way up to 35 by 1:30 tomorrow afternoon. Now, that sounds really nice, doesn't it? But then there's the other shoe that has to drop. We still have the cold Arctic air mass that wants to come on down and join us. So here's what's going to happen. We'll get up to 36 degrees on Saturday, then Sunday down to 27, and then by Tuesday we're down to 1 below 0 for the high temperature. On Wednesday we're 2 below 0 for the high temperature. We don't even want to know what the overnight lows are going to be. They're going to be like 14 to 16 below 0. Then we'll have more on that coming up in a few more minutes.
All right, thanks, Bob. Well, influenza taking a toll on Montana this year. 405 new cases reported within the first week of 2020. 202 of those right here in Yellowstone County. All but 4 Montana counties reported at least 1 case of the flu. Now, here's some strong reminders from county health experts at Riverstone Health. Stay home when you are sick. Influenza is different than a seasonal cold in that the flu comes on suddenly. And if you have it, you are contagious a day before you show symptoms. So constantly wash your hands and avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth.
New Early Childhood and Family Support Division has been created by the Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services. That new division will consolidate several programs such as child care licensing, early childhood services, child nutrition programs, and home visiting child health programs. The goal is to improve collaboration while aligning funding, priorities, and practices. New administrator Jamie Pelagi says early childhood experiences play a huge role in the success of a person, and combining these services will help the state better support families.
We also know that little kids spend most of their time with their families, as they should, and so we want to make sure that we're supporting parents in the very best way possible to make sure that the family thrives and that kids have what they need to thrive at a very young age, and then also so that they're school ready.
Around 100 employees will be under the new division, and no jobs were threatened by the cut or by the change. The state says the creation of the new division is budget neutral for DPHHS.
Montana's full legislature meets in regular session only in odd-numbered non-election years when it sets the state budget. and deals with other policy matters. But next week, most of the legislature will head to Helena for a special set of big picture policy meetings. MTN's chief political reporter Mike Dennison tells us why and what to expect.
It's called Legislative Week, and while lawmakers are required to attend, most of them are likely to be here at the Capitol. The main subjects are what can or should Montanans expect from their government and what's the best way to pay for it.
We've got to discuss what services we wish for, what services can be provided more efficiently and more effectively, and maybe what services need to be eliminated, and how we plan to pay for this in a manner that is equitably distributed.
It's also billed as a chance for all lawmakers to see emerging budget issues and how they intersect with policy.
I'm thinking of it as an opportunity for budget and policy discussions that a lot of legislators don't otherwise get. If you serve on a finance committee or an appropriations committee, you hardly ever hear about policy, and vice versa. For a lot of us, this is supposed to be more of a melding of those two areas.
At least 3 legislative studies on tax structure and spending are already on tap. Lawmakers and the public will weigh in next week. Another study looks at whether the legislature should meet in annual sessions, but most who spoke with MTN News said that's not the main event next week. However, tax reform for state and local governments is a key subject. Democratic House Minority Leader Casey Schreiner said he hopes Legislative Week isn't just an attempt to build the case for a statewide sales tax. Jones and others say that's not the intent, but some believe property taxpayers are getting overburdened and that something has to give.
And so there needs to be a discussion held. Is this tax structure and the growth we would forecast coming sustainable? Is it equitable? Do we need to hold a discussion of what other alternatives might exist?
Jones says next week is a chance for all lawmakers to examine the data and not just rely on anecdotal evidence. It's also an election year, so along with the big ideas and the looks at long-term policy in Montana, expect some campaign politics next week as well. At the Capitol, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
Thanks, Mike. Now, Legislative Week kicks off on Monday in Helena with meetings and hearings for most of the week.
After 8 years in the Montana House and another 8 years as a state senator, John Sesso is ready to step away from politics. As a Democrat, Sesso served as minority leader his whole time in the Senate. Sesso says he's proud of the fact that he's been able to work with legislators from both sides of the aisle. He's currently busy working on the mine waste cleanup in Butte as the city's Superfund coordinator. State Representative Ryan Lynch of Butte is expected to run for Sesso's seat in the state Senate.
Well, this year marks the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II.
And in this week's edition of MTN's Face the State, we're going to share the story of one unique unit that traces its origins back to Montana. The 1st Special Service Force was an elite American and Canadian unit trained in unconventional warfare. And this weekend, we'll meet Bill Woon of the 1st Special Service Force Association and Ray Reed of the Montana Military Museum. The two will discuss what the force accomplished and the legacy it's left behind.
The soldiers in the force spent months in intensive training at Helena's Fort Harrison and earned the nickname the Devil's Brigade during fierce fighting against German troops in Italy.
They utilized all of the training that they had received in Helena in fighting at night, in infiltrating behind enemy lines, and for 99 days, that's what they did.
And Face the State will air this Sunday at 6:30 a.m. right here on Q2.
Well, there's more news from across our state on tonight's MTN 9 o'clock news. Bone-chilling cold on tap for nearly every city around Montana. We're going to have some advice on how to keep those pipes in working order during this Arctic blast. Join me for that story. Much more tonight in the MTN statewide news.